They sold her for being too big. The cowboy picked her up and said, "You're just right for my arms." Wyatt's Crossing, Wyoming Territory, spring of 1883. The midday sun glared down on the town square, but the air was far from warm. It was sharp, mean-spirited, like the voices circling the wooden auction platform at the center of Wyatt's Crossing. People had come from nearby ranches and distant homesteads, not for cattle or horses, but for something rarer. A human auction, not that anyone called it that aloud. Helping hands, they said. Unwanted mouths finding purpose. But everyone knew the truth. On the platform stood a girl. No, a woman. Angela, 22. Tall as a doorway, shoulders broad as a fence gate. She stood barefoot on the sun-bleached planks, wrists bound loosely, chin tilted upward like it mattered. Around her the townspeople gawked like she was some traveling oddity. "Who in their right minds want that?" a man cackled. "She'd crush a bed in one night," another muttered. "Horse yoked snap under her weight," came a third. "Drunk on dust and cruelty." Angela's throat burned, not from the heat, but from swallowing every insult like it did not matter. Her family, what was left of it, had sold her to the trader for a bag of flour, a pound of lard, and a promise they would not starve. She was too big, they had said. No one would marry her. Better she work than waste. "I said we'll start at 50, barked the auctioneer, Clyde Hargrove, his voice oily with impatience. $50 for a workin' woman, big as a draft mule and just as strong." No hands rose. Angela's mind drifted. She was 8 again, lifting split logs with her father in the snowy foothills, the two of them laughing at how quickly they cleared the yard. Her strength had been a gift then, something he admired. "You're stronger than most boys," he'd say, "and that's nothing to be ashamed of." Fever took him the same year their farm gave out. Hargrove paced around her. 40. "Come on, gentlemen, look at her arms. She could carry 2 buckets a mile without breaking a sweat." Still nothing. Angela's hands clenched. Her wrists, red with rope burns, trembled not from fear, but from humiliation. "She too big to keep indoors," a woman scoffed. "Probably eat more than 3 men." "She'd scare the devil straight back to hell," another jeered. The crowd laughed again. 30, then. Who'll take her for 30? A silence fell, the kind that scraped against the bone. Hargrove's smile twitched. 25, final offer. The mood soured. Folks began to murmur, shifting, ready to walk away. Angela could feel her dignity peeling away with every second. Then, footsteps. Measured. Calm. A rhythm that did not rush. A cowboy stepped through the parting crowd, broad shoulders beneath a worn duster, hat pulled low, boots kicking up silence. Dennis Cole. Most folks only whispered his name, a man who never drank, never bragged, but whose word on land or cattle was gold. He owned no more than he needed, but no one crossed him. He walked straight to the platform and looked up. The murmurs stopped. Even Hargrove froze. Angela looked down, braced for more judgment. Instead, Dennis set his hat aside, climbed the steps, and, without asking, slid one arm under her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Gasps rippled through the square. Angela's breath caught. She should have struggled, but the moment his arm steadied her, something unfamiliar surged through her chest. Respect. Dennis looked at the stunned crowd, then at Angela. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "You're just right for my arms." The square fell silent. No one laughed. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Angela's heart pounded as he carried her down the steps, past the people who had mocked her. Not a word was said. But something had shifted. A crowd that once saw her as a joke now watched like they'd witnessed something sacred. As Dennis turned the corner of the square, the first tear escaped down Angela's cheek. Not from shame. From the simple shock of being chosen. If your heart skipped at that moment, when strength met gentleness, tap the hype button and help us keep these stories alive. The frontier has many tales, but few as bold as this one. The wagon creaked as it rolled out of Wyatt's Crossing. Angela sat stiffly, the rough wooden seat biting into her back. The auction still echoed, laughter, whispers, shame. Only one voice had cut through, Dennis Cole's. He now sat beside her, silent as the horse's hooves clapped down the trail. "You didn't have to buy me," she said. "Wasn't buying," Dennis replied, "just stopping a circus." "Is that what I was? A sideshow?" He didn't answer. He reached behind the bench, pulled out a folded wool coat, and handed it to her. "For the rope burns." She hesitated, then draped it over her shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine and saddle oil. "I don't need pity." "Good, I don't offer it." Silence again. Not cold, just unfinished. The trail curved through red hills and sagebrush. Mountains loomed in the distance, still crowned in snow. Angelea held the coat tighter. Her wrists throbbed, but not as much as the ache behind her ribs. Back in town she'd been sold like cattle. But next to this quiet man, she didn't know what she was. As the sun dipped lower, 2 riders passed on horseback. One tipped his hat, muttered, "Still collecting strays, Cole?" Dennis didn't respond. Angela caught the tension. "They know you?" "Everyone does. Small town." "What do they say?" He paused. "That I don't take bribes, don't drink, don't marry for money." She blinked. "That last part sounds personal." "Had offers. Didn't like the terms." She studied him. "So you live alone? No wife, no family, and people think you're strange." He finally met her eyes. "You think I'm strange too." "I think people fear what they don't understand," she said. "I should know." He turned back to the trail, but his jaw eased. By twilight, the wagon rolled into a narrow canyon. Angela saw it then, tucked into the valley like a secret. Dennis's ranch. The house was modest, wood and stone. Smoke curled from the chimney. A corral stretched to the east, horses grazing quietly. No workers, no voices, just wind and creaking hinges. Angela climbed down and followed him inside. The house was simple, clean, quiet, a rifle above the hearth, books on the walls, a faded photo on the mantel. A young woman, soft eyes, wind-swept hair. Angela paused. "Your wife?" Dennis froze at the stove, kettle in hand. "Was going to be." He set it down, voice low. "Her name was Eliza. We were coming back from visiting her mother. 5 men ambushed us, wanted my horses. She didn't make it." Angela's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "She was small," he said. "People said she wasn't made for ranch life, but she had fire. Wouldn't let a man speak cruel without answering back." Angela stepped closer. "You still love her." He nodded once. "Some things don't leave you, even if the world does." She turned. The firelight caught the bruises on her arms. "Then why take me in? You barely know me." He met her eyes. "Because I saw something familiar. Not in your size, in your eyes." Angela looked down, throat tight. "You're not a stray," he said. "You're someone the world misunderstood. So was I." Angela looked at him again, and for the first time since Wyatt's Crossing, she didn't feel ashamed of who she was. Angela had never known silence like this. Not the kind that wrapped around your ears like cotton, but the kind that echoed in your chest. Dennis's ranch was peaceful, no shouting, no orders. But even freedom could feel like a strange kind of prison when you did not know what to do with it. She moved around the house carefully, trying not to knock over furniture with her elbows or shoulders. The house wasn't cramped, but it felt like it was closing in. Each morning she rose early. Habit, not desire. She chopped wood, fetched water, swept the porch. Not because Dennis asked, he never did, but because stillness made her feel useless, like she was waiting to be told what she was for. At night they ate quietly under lamplight. He'd ask how she liked her stew. She said it was fine. He offered the last biscuit. She refused. He nodded. But Dennis noticed things. One afternoon she stepped through the front door and stopped. The frame, low enough to brush her forehead, was now taller. Dennis didn't say a word, just passed her with a shovel over his shoulder, whistling. Another day, a new chair appeared at the table, sturdier, wider, built from oak. For once, she didn't feel like she might break something by sitting. That evening, she said, "Thank you." He didn't look up. About time the house fit both of us. Angela didn't know what to say. No one had made space for her before. He didn't look at her like others did. No calculation, no pity. Just clear, steady eyes, like he saw her, and didn't flinch. Still, trust didn't come easy. She kept her distance. He never crossed it. Sometimes she caught him watching her split logs or mend her dress, not with curiosity, but with respect, like he was learning. But the silence lingered. The wall remained. She wanted to leave. He, she suspected, wanted her to stay. That tension sat between them like a coiled rope, never pulled, never slack. Then came the night at the saloon. They rode into town for supplies. The general store had closed early, so Dennis offered a drink. She hesitated, then agreed. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and sweat. Laughter too loud. Boots thudded. The piano clanged out of tune. Angela tried to shrink, but there was no hiding someone like her in Wyatt's Crossing. The muttering started. "He's built like a barn door. Bet she lifts the whole bed. Yours, Cole. Hope your ribs are insured." Dennis said nothing, just sipped his whiskey, jaw tight. Angela stared at the floor, then a drunk, red-faced and swaying, stumbled toward her. "Hey, big girl," he slurred. "Bet you could toss me clear across the room, huh?" She turned away. He grabbed her wrist. That was enough. Dennis was across the room in seconds. No shouting, no gun, just a firm grip on the man's wrist. He twisted it. The mug dropped. The saloon fell silent. Dennis leaned in, voice low and sharp. "Touch her again, and you'll answer to me." The drunk stumbled back, clutching his arm. Even the piano player froze. Angela's chest tightened, not from fear, but from what she saw in Dennis's face. Not anger, not pride, just calm protection. Outside, walking to the wagon, she said, "You didn't have to do that." He looked at her. "Yes, I did." She looked away, warmth rising in her chest. At the ranch, she paused at the door. "You're not like other men." Dennis met her eyes. "Neither are you like other women." And for once, that didn't feel like a curse. That night, while coyotes cried in the hills, Angela sat in her new chair by the fire. Dennis across from her. Two souls, broken once. And maybe, just maybe, starting to mend. The days passed quietly on the ranch. Angela had started to find rhythm in the silence. Her body grew stronger again, not from punishment, but from purpose. She fed the horses, helped mend fences, harvested onions and turnips from the back garden. She slept easier, ate fuller, the bruises on her wrists faded. but a question still burned beneath her skin. Why did Dennis bring her here, and what else was he not saying? It was late one morning when she found herself sorting tools in the old storage barn. Dust hung thick in the air, and the scent of dry hay clung to every surface. While shifting a trunk of spare nails and rope, she spotted a rolled set of parchment, half tucked behind a crate. She unrolled it slowly. Blueprints. Detailed plans for new paddocks, expanded fencing, irrigation lines, but what caught her eye were the notes in the margins. Initials she didn't recognize, and symbols marked like boundaries. Angela squinted. One of the symbols matched a brand she'd seen on crates from the East pasture. Another matched the crest painted on wagons from a neighboring ranch, Redstone Holdings, the largest spread in 3 counties. Run by a man she'd only heard of in whispers, Silas Merritt. Angela rolled up the parchment, heart beating faster. That evening, as they sat by the fire, she finally asked, "Who is Silas Merritt?" Dennis didn't look up. He kept sharpening his knife, steady strokes against the whetstone. "Well, I saw his mark, on the blueprints." He paused. The knife stopped mid-stroke. After a moment, he set both blade and stone aside. "He wanted to buy this land," Dennis said. "All of it, 10 years back." Angela waited. "I said no. So he tried another way, offered marriage to my fiancée, thinking I'd fold if it came with a ring and a dowry." Her chest tightened. "She refused?" Dennis's voice lowered. "She didn't get the chance. Cabin fire, no proof, no witnesses, but the sheriff found boot prints outside. Not mine." Angela felt the chill long before the fire cracked. "You think it was him?" "I know it." Silence grew heavy between them. Only the flames spoke, licking against the stone hearth. Angela stared at her hands. "Is that why you live like this, alone?" Dennis met her gaze. "It's easier than watching people pretend justice comes when you wait for it." Angela didn't answer. But that night, she dreamed of smoke, of footsteps in the dark, of wounds that never fully closed. A week later, they rode into town. Angela had come to pick up leather from the tanner, enough to repair 2 saddles. Dennis was meeting a supplier near the stockyard. She stepped into the market alley, head high, shoulders square. Then came the voices. "That's her, the giant girl." "Not girl, beast. They say he took her in 'cause she's strong as a mule. Or maybe it's the land he's after." A cluster of women stood outside the fabric store, their smiles sharp as hat pins. One leaned closer, eyes glinting. "You married yet? Or just playing house for acreage?" Another one snorted. "She looks like a bull in a bonnet. Poor man, must have lost his mind." Angela froze. Her grip tightened on the leather parcel. She turned to walk away, but her boot caught the edge of a step. The bundle slipped from her arms, landing with a thud. The laughter started, sharp, vicious, and then quiet. Bootsteps. Angela turned and saw Dennis standing between her and the women. He knelt, picked up the bundle, brushed it off like it was priceless, and placed it gently back into her arms. Then he turned to the women, voice calm but clear. "These are not hands for shame," he said. "These are hands that build, that save." The silence that followed was thunderous. Not a word from the group. Not even a breath. He looked back at Angela. "You ready to go?" She nodded. They walked away. No more laughter followed them. And for the first time in years, Angela felt something new bloom in her chest. Not pride, not defiance, something quieter, belonging. The wind carried whispers like wildfire through the dusty town of Granger's Hollow. They started small, murmurs behind closed doors, sideways glances at the market. But by the end of the week, the rumors had grown teeth. "They say she's cursed," one voice said. Brings misfortune wherever she goes, said another. Big as a barn and twice as dangerous. Angela heard it all. Each word felt like grit under her skin. At first she ignored them, stared straight ahead and kept to her work. But when she walked through town with Dennis to pick up supplies, she could feel the way the street shifted around her. Conversations halted. Eyes lingered too long. Mothers pulled their children closer. She didn't need Dennis to tell her who was behind it. Randall Hayes, wealthy, ruthless, and always 2 steps behind morality. The man had tried to buy Dennis's land, his reputation, and once his heart, through the hand of a woman who was now gone. Failing that, Randall now turned to fear and fire to destroy what he could not own. Angela stared out at the hills beyond the ranch that night, her jaw tight, arms folded across her chest. The moon glinted off the iron horseshoe she had just finished shaping. She was good at this, building, fixing, making things last. But she wasn't sure she could fix the storm headed their way. Dennis stood behind her. You're thinking about leaving, he said quietly. Angela didn't turn around. If I go, he'll have no more reason to stir the town against you. The fires will die out. No, Dennis said firmly. They'll just burn someone else. Angela said nothing. The next afternoon, a pair of small hands tugged at her apron. Abigail? Angela knelt down. The girl, with her tangled braids and dirt-smudged face, looked up with wide, serious eyes. I heard them talking, she whispered. About you leaving. Angela gently tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. Maybe it's for the best. No, Abigail said fiercely. If you leave, they win. And I'll lose, the only person who makes me feel safe. Angela froze. The words cut deeper than Randall's rumors ever could. She had spent so long thinking she was too much, too big, too loud, too strong. But to Abigail, she wasn't too much. She was enough. She was protection. And she said, that night the flames came, not from gossip, but from lanterns and torches. Angela woke to the sharp scent of smoke. Through the barn window she saw figures moving like shadows in the dark, 5, maybe 6 men, tearing down fencing, spooking the horses. She ran barefoot into the cold, grabbing a pitchfork, heart thundering. The horses inside the stable were panicked, slamming against the walls, eyes wild with terror. One bolt could kill them, or her. But Angela didn't hesitate. She flung open the gate and stood between the terrified herd and the open night. Easy, she whispered, spreading her arms wide. It's all right. I'm not letting them touch you. A man lunged toward her from the shadows. Before he could reach her, another figure tackled him from the side. Dennis. And then came others. Townspeople. Men and women Angela barely knew. Some held tools. Others came empty-handed, but not empty-hearted. They had come running, not from fear, but for her. The standoff broke into chaos, fists flying, men shouting. But no one laid a hand on Angela. The townspeople surrounded her, shoulder to shoulder, until the last of Randall's men fled. Silence settled like dust after a storm. Angela stood still, sweat mingling with the chill of the night, hair wild around her shoulders. Dennis stepped forward, his face bruised, his shirt torn, but his eyes only on her. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her, tight, sure, warm. She's not too big, Dennis said loudly, turning to face the crowd. She's the reason we're still standing. No one spoke. Then someone, maybe Abigail's father, nodded. Another man removed his hat. A woman stepped forward and touched Angela's arm, gently, respectfully. And just like that, something shifted. Not in Angela, not in Dennis, but in the town. The fire had long been extinguished, but the heat of it lingered in Angela's bones. In the silence that followed the standoff, Dennis stood beside her beneath the stars. His face was turned to the hills, where the wind carried only dust and old ghosts. Angela broke the stillness. "Tell me." Dennis didn't ask what she meant. He simply nodded, eyes heavy. "It was 3 years ago," he said, voice low. "Randall came to me with an offer. Said he wanted to buy the ranch. Said if I didn't sell, he'd find another way to take it." Angela folded her arms, jaw tense. "I didn't take him seriously until he started showing up wherever Claire went, whispering to her, offering her a better life, more money, more peace." "Claire?" Angela asked. "My fiancée," Dennis said. "She wanted to stay. She believed we could outlast him. But one night the barn went up in flames. She was inside." Angela's chest tightened. "You think he did it?" "I know he did," Dennis said, eyes hard. "But the sheriff said it was lightning. Freak accident, they called it. Randall's hands stayed clean." A heavy silence settled between them. Angela's voice was quiet. "Is that why you kept me here? To fill her place?" Dennis didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't defensive. It was honest. "Maybe at first," he admitted. "Maybe I saw a second chance. Someone strong enough to help me keep this land, keep fighting." He turned to face her. "But not anymore. Because you're not her. You're not anyone's shadow. You're the reason I still believe people like us deserve more than grief." Angela looked away, tears stinging at the edges of her vision, not from sorrow, from recognition. Later that week, the town council called a public meeting at the chapel. The air was thick with tension. People packed the pews. Randall Hayes stood near the pulpit, smug in his tailored vest, flanked by his supporters. "I warned you," Randall said, his voice loud and oily. "I warned you all what would happen if we let a monster take root in our town." Gasps rose from the crowd. Dennis stood near the back, fists clenched. "This woman," Randall sneered, "was bought like cattle at an auction, and now she threatens our children, our livelihoods. You call it strength, I call it corruption." Angela rose slowly from the bench. Her boots echoed as she walked down the center aisle, heads turning, murmurs rising. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she pulled something from her belt, a woodcutter's axe. Not to threaten, but to hold, as a symbol. She stepped onto the front dais, facing the room. "If being strong is a crime," Angela said, voice calm and clear, "then I am guilty." Silence. "But don't forget, strength built your barns after the storm. Strength lifted your wagons out of the mud. Strength carved this town from stone and dust." She raised the axe slightly. "This axe chopped firewood for the schoolhouse. It repaired the fence that kept your cattle in. And last night it stood between your children and chaos." She turned to Randall. "You call me a monster? I say you're afraid, not of me, but of the idea that someone like me doesn't need your permission to be worth something." The chapel was deathly quiet. Then someone stood, an old woman. She nodded once, firmly. A farmer rose next, then a schoolteacher. One by one, townsfolk stood. No cheers, no applause, just quiet defiance. Randall's smirk faltered. Angela stepped back, not victorious, but unafraid. She had spoken, and the town had listened. The dry season had turned the fields to tinder. Crops stood brittle under the weight of late summer heat, and even the wind carried the scent of something waiting to burn. That night, the fire came. Dennis saw it first, an orange glow creeping up the ridge. He didn't need to guess. He knew. Randall had stopped whispering and finally bared his teeth. "They set the south field ablaze," he said, bursting into the house where Angela was stitching a tear in her coat. Angela stood immediately. "We have to move now. Get the buckets. Wake the neighbors." Within minutes, the bell at the church was ringing, a sound reserved only for death or disaster. And tonight, it was both. They ran. Angela's legs outpaced most men, her strides fueled by fury and resolve. Flames licked the sky by the time they reached the field. Dennis's crop, his livelihood, was already a wall of fire. But worse than the crop was the wind. It turned the blaze toward the barns, the town, the lives of everyone nearby. "We need a brake line," Dennis shouted. Angela's eyes swept the property. There was an old wooden livestock wall behind the barn, 30 feet long, thick with rot and termites. "If we pull it down, it'll form a barrier," she said. Dennis blinked. It'd take 10 men. Angela was already moving. She gripped the first beam, muscles in her arms bunched and pulled. With a roar she yanked, and the post cracked from its base. The townsfolk watched in stunned silence as she moved beam after beam, the structure groaning like a beast in its final breath. Then, with one final heave, the entire wall came down, slamming to the earth with a thunderous crash, right in the path of the fire. It worked. The flames hit the wall and scattered, losing strength in the break. Buckets of water followed, men and women working side by side until the last spark died beneath their feet. When it was over, Angela stood soaked in sweat, ash coating her arms, the handle of a broken beam still in her hand. She turned and saw them watching, the town. The ones who had once called her too much, too strong, a burden. Now they looked at her with awe, with respect, with gratitude. A man stepped forward, a rancher whose fence Angela had once helped mend in silence. "You saved my barn," he said simply. Angela opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her throat was thick with smoke, and something else, something deeper. Another voice followed. "Mine too." Then, "My daughter was in the house behind that barn. You saved her." The crowd swelled around her, not to threaten or mock, but to thank. Dennis moved through them, eyes locked on her. He reached her side, his hand closing around hers, the one still gripping the broken beam. "She's not too big," he said, his voice steady. "She's the reason we're still standing." No one laughed. They nodded. One by one, heads turned from Randall, who stood near the road on horseback, flanked by only a few loyal men. Someone muttered, "Coward, didn't even bring a bucket." Another, "He just watched." And then silence, except for the distant crackle of dying embers and the steady breathing of a town that had just found its backbone. Randall turned his horse and rode away. This time, no one followed. The autumn wind carried the scent of baked apples and wood smoke through the town square, where lanterns swayed gently above rows of pies, hand-carved pumpkins, and ribbon-tied stalks of wheat. It was the harvest festival, once a celebration Angela had only heard about from a distance. Now she stood at the center of it. Children darted past with sticky fingers and ribbons in their hair. The townsfolk milled about, not avoiding her gaze but seeking it, smiling, nodding, thanking. It had been weeks since the fire, weeks since Angela had pulled down a wall and, in doing so, built something new. Trust. "Angela," the mayor's voice rang out from the makeshift stage. "Would you come up here, please?" She hesitated for a breath, her palms suddenly clammy. But Dennis, beside her, touched her back gently. "You earned this," he whispered. She walked slowly to the stage. The crowd parted. No laughter followed, no whispers, only the sound of clapping, steady, genuine, growing louder with every step. She reached the platform. The mayor took her hand. "Ms. Angela," he said, "once, some people saw your strength as strange. Now, we see it for what it truly is, a gift. This year's Harvest Festival is not just about grain and fruit. It's about who kept the ground beneath us from burning. Please accept our thanks." The crowd roared. Angela blinked hard against the sting behind her eyes. Then Dennis stepped up beside her. He held something in his hand, a silver arm cuff, delicately engraved, old and polished smooth by time. "My mother wore this," he said softly, though his voice carried. "She gave it to my sister, and when she passed I kept it, thinking I'd never find someone strong enough to wear it, not strong in arms but in spirit." He turned to Angela, his gaze steady. "You were never too big. You were always just right, for this town, for this life, and for me." The crowd hushed. He gently slipped the bracelet over her wrist. Angela looked down at it, then up into Dennis's eyes. The silver caught the lantern light, but it was the warmth in his gaze that held her still. People began to cheer, loudly. Someone shouted, "About time!" And laughter rose, this time not cruel but bright and full of joy. Angela smiled, not the tight smile she'd learned to wear in pain, not the polite smile to keep people at ease, but a true smile, wide, unguarded, radiant. Dennis offered his arm. She took it, and together they stepped off the stage. The town swelled around them, no longer an audience, but a community. Children ran to her, asking about the fire, the horses, the wall. Women invited her to join the baking table. Men clapped her on the shoulder, as if she'd been there all her life. No one said too big. No one said not like us. They said, "You belong here." And she did. Later that night, as the music played and dancers spun in circles beneath the moonlight, Angela stood by the fire pit, Dennis beside her. Abigail tugged at her hand, sticky with cider. "Will you dance with me?" the girl asked. Angela laughed. "I'm not much of a dancer." Dennis leaned in. "You pulled down a wall and saved a town. I think you can handle a few steps." Angela took Abigail's hand, and then she took Dennis's. They danced, not perfectly, not gracefully, but fully, joyfully, alive. The townsfolk joined, laughter ringing into the stars. Angela looked around, at the faces, the lights, the land she now helped protect. She was no longer a girl sold on a platform, judged for what she was. She was a woman who had built something, a life, a home, and finally, freedom. Under western stars, beside the man who saw her as just right, Angela found more than freedom, she found belonging. Once sold as a burden, she became the heart that held a town together. If Angela's strength spoke to you, if standing tall against cruelty resonates, hit that hype button. It shows us you want more stories like this one. And don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Love Stories, where tales of grit, heart, and redemption ride strong through every dust trail. More unforgettable journeys await, just like Angela's. We'll see you on the next trail.